Welcome back to English 102. It's week 2, which means that it's time for your first essay. This week we'll be focused on drafting, and next week we'll start the revisions. Just as a reminder, a draft means a complete essay and not just an outline. I want to see a full introduction, body, and conclusion. It's not going to be perfect, and that's fine, but it does need to be complete. As you remember, the first step in the drafting process is to establish a rhetorical situation by asking, who is my audience? What is my purpose in writing? What is the genre that I am writing? Which tone and language should I choose? And what should the design be? Throughout the course, most of these elements will stay the same. However, for each of your 4 major essays, you will be writing in a different genre. That means you'll be writing a different type of argument. We're starting with a causal argument, which essentially asks the question, why? Why is something happening? Be careful to just address that question in your claim. Causal arguments are about logos or logical appeals. You need to show your reader how we go from A to B to C in a logical manner. Whenever you're dealing with issues of logic, you need to be on the lookout for logical fallacies, which are arguments that might seem to make sense, but don't actually hold up under scrutiny. I've posted a list of common logical fallacies in your module that you'll want to review. One of those focuses specifically on arguing a faulty cause. To argue a cause, you need to understand the difference between causation and correlation. Causation means that one thing made another thing happen. Correlation means that 2 things happened at the same time but aren't necessarily linked. The most common error in cause arguments is mixing these 2 ideas up. For example, in the past 100 years, there has been significant rise in global temperatures. Also in the past 100 years, there has been a significant drop in the number of pirates in the world. Now, I could conclude that pirates must be dying of heat stroke in large numbers, but I would be wrong. In that claim, I'm arguing causation when correlation is the right answer. Sometimes, though, the mistake is not looking at the topic broadly enough. While heat isn't killing pirates, it is arguable that both the rise in temperature and the decline of piracy are caused by industrialization. When 2 things are correlated, take the time to look for a common cause. For your specific essay, you'll be choosing a trend that is happening in America right now. A trend is just a change in the general direction that something is going. If I were looking at a trend in fashion, for example, I would look at the hot new thing on the market, gender-neutral clothing maybe. If I were interested in a trend in education, I might explore the rise in technology use in teaching. That's a trend you are all experiencing right now. If I were looking to the environment, I might explore those rising global temperatures that I mentioned before. So what you need to do is pick a topic, pretty much any topic that is interesting to you, and then ask what the new, changing, happening thing is in that topic. That's your trend. Once you've decided on your trend, you need to look for the cause. Why is this thing happening? The answer to that question will be the claim that you're arguing in your essay. To support this claim, you need to use at least 2 sources, one of which needs to be scholarly. Remember, that means that it's intended for an academic audience and must include citations. I've posted a video on identifying sources in your modules if you need more review on this. I strongly recommend that you use the library resources to find this source. The databases called Academic Search Complete and ProQuest are a good place to start, and both of them have search options to look only for scholarly sources. Just being from the library isn't enough. They need to be specifically listed as scholarly or peer-reviewed. I've posted a guide from the library to help you out. One of your other assignments for this week, your source evaluation, should be completed using one of your 2 sources for this essay. This evaluation is based on the crash course videos from last week, so if you haven't watched those yet, do so ASAP. I introduced some basic elements of research and finding sources last week, and I want to elaborate on these topics this week because they're going to be a significant part of your writing this term. Whenever you are using sources, the first thing you need to do is determine that it's credible. Your own credibility is determined by the sources that you use. If you use bad information, it doesn't matter how good your argument is, no one will take you seriously. So, here's a few things to check. Is there an author listed? If there is not an author, that is an immediate red flag because you have no way to check the author's credibility. Play it safe and just don't use those sources. And yes, that includes Wikipedia. It's fine to look something up in Wikipedia, scroll to the bottom of the page and see what sources are listed there. But you should always use the original source and not someone else's summary of it. Even if the person doing the summary is doing so fairly, they may have left out something important to your argument because they didn't think it was important. Who is publishing it? If a study tells you that sugar isn't bad for you and it was commissioned by the Hershey Company, they may have ulterior motives. Bias matters. Now, just because a publisher has a bias, that doesn't mean that their information is all lies. It may be perfectly factual, but there's a good chance that you're only getting one side of the story. In that case, you'd want to find another, less biased source to compare the information. If you're researching online, don't just check the URL. Just because it's an edu or an org doesn't mean that it's a good information. You need to evaluate the material yourself. Check the information. This may seem obvious, but it's important. The readings from last week on fact-checking gave you some steps on how to do this. And I probably don't need to say this, but the internet lies. If they're not justifying their facts and telling you where they're from, don't trust them. And memes are never reliable sources. Once you've established whether or not the source is credible, you need to decide whether it's scholarly or general. A scholarly source means that it's specifically intended for an academic audience. General sources can still be credible and very useful, they just have a different scope. Scholarly sources can be identified by the following features. They'll be written by authors with credentials in that field. They will be published by an academic journal or university press. These aren't meant for a broad audience. They will have an elevated tone and style. They won't sound conversational. They will do a deep dive into the subject rather than giving you a broad overview of it. And here's the dead giveaway. They will always, without exception, cite their sources both in the body paragraph and at the end in a works cited list. If it doesn't have cited sources, then it's not scholarly. Full stop. I've posted some help guides from the library in your modules, so if you need more review, check those out. I've also posted some links to some citation guides. Remember, if you don't cite your source, every single one of them, both in your body paragraphs and at the end, then it's plagiarism. And if you plagiarize, you will fail the essay. By the time you've reached English 102, you should know how to do this, so no excuses. Ask if there's something you can't remember or figure out. I've posted a TED Talk video which shows an example of a causal argument. As you watch, pay attention to how the argument is constructed by engaging the audience, establishing the speaker's credibility, setting up the topic, the trend that is being discussed, laying out the specific causes with diverse types of support, and then letting us know why we should care about the topic. You also have a discussion board on 5 Little Pigs. Finally, you have your first writing exercise. This will focus on developing a counterargument, which is required in your essay. A counterargument is simply the opposing claim to your own. If you are arguing possible cause A, then possible cause B would be your counterargument. Including those opposing viewpoints can strengthen your credibility, and offering a rebuttal that explains why your claim is the stronger one can help provide more support for your ideas. As always, if you have any questions or problems, just let me know. You'll save yourself a lot of grief if you ask your questions early, rather than taking on the essay and having to redo it later because you got it wrong. So, go forth and write.